managed to do so, yet not before poking himself twice more with the razor-sharp thorns. Using the branch like a broom, he swept it over the pathway left by the body. "Let's get him in the hole. You can do that later." The man, sweeping away evidence, hastily completed his task and then tossed the limb aside. Together, the two men rolled the body into the hole and covered it with the dirt and rock they had removed. They pushed several boulders over the fresh grave site and kicked dirt over the area, doing their best to make it blend into its surroundings, so as not to make it obvious to any hikers who might wander off the trail leading from the lake to the nearby caves, that it was, in fact, a grave. They both assumed it was deep enough to keep any wild animals from the decomposing flesh. The man, who had minutes earlier been sweeping away the pathway left by the body, picked the mesquite branch back up and gave the area a final brushing before tossing the makeshift broom into the nearby brush. His companion doused the lantern and put it, along with the shovel, in the back of the Jeep, which was parked next to the Lincoln. It was difficult to see, with the area now plunged in darkness. Random twinkling of the stars overhead spread across the black sky. The man, who had dragged the body to the gravesite, got into the Lincoln, while his companion climbed into the Jeep. They turned on the vehicle's headlights and engines and began driving toward the lake, the Lincoln leading the way. The rocky terrain made a bumpy ride for the Lincoln, but it was a short trip to the shoreline. The Lincoln came to a stop. The man inside the vehicle turned off the engine and headlights and got out of the car. Instead of putting it in park, he left it in neutral. He stood by the open door on the driver's side of the car and looked back at the Jeep, whose front bumper was about to touch the back of the larger vehicle. He watched as the Jeep shoved the dead man's car into Sutter's Lake. The man driving the Jeep put it in park for a moment and got out. Together, the two men stood on the edge of the lake and watched the Lincoln disappear under the frigid water. Had the Jeep's headlights been turned off, they would not have been able to see. After a few moments, they climbed into the Jeep and drove away. Chapter 1. Sophie wondered if the man at the service station had given her the wrong directions. He had insisted this was a shortcut to Coulson Cemetery, but the desolate road, lined with untended cottonwood trees, seemed to be taking her away from town and civilization. Since making the turn, she hadn't seen another vehicle. There were no houses or buildings in sight. She also regretted not picking up a bottle of water, because the last time she'd had anything to drink was on the flight, and now she was getting thirsty. Just as she decided to start looking for a place to turn around, Sophie spied the cemetery, and then its back entrance. Letting out a sigh of relief, she pulled off the road and stopped the car. There was no parking lot, just a flat dirt area near the road leading to the back gate. There were no other cars in sight. After turning off the engine, she glanced around and, for a brief moment, considered the wisdom of parking alone in such an isolated area. Instead of dwelling on the thought, she reached for her purse and pulled out an envelope. Sitting alone in the rental car, Sophie removed the tattered letter from the envelope and began to read. She had already read it more than a dozen times. Dear Carmen, it's been a long time. I wondered if you would contact me after you heard about Anthony's death. Gina tried to find you after he disappeared, but it was like you fell off the face of the earth. I am glad to hear you and Tony are doing well. I can understand why you left. Gina refused to see that side of her brother. You mentioned you heard about Gina's passing and our daughter's birth. It has not been easy, but we are getting by, thanks for asking. Since I didn't know where you were and he had no other family, I arranged to have him buried at the cemetery near Gina. While I wasn't far.